Hi everyone, Aidan here at the trailer. Today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the SumoSprings for the rear axle on our 2020 Ford F-150. So right now we've got no tongue weight on the truck. The trailer is unhooked. We're in position ready to go, but I want to see, with no weight on the truck, where's our stock ride height? And to do that, I want to take ourselves over to the wheel well and take a measurement from the ground to the top inside edge of that wheel well. And for us today, that measurement's gonna be sitting right at 40 inches. So now we're gonna hook up the trailer, see how much that brings the back end of the F-150 down. This is rated to pull this camper just fine, but with stock suspension, I do expect to see a fair bit of drop. Now, as I'm dropping this camper down onto the ball, I can see the truck dropping down a little bit here, and we have a GoPro rolling underneath so we can actually see what's happening to that factory bump stop and see how much it's dropping down and what kind of gap is left before any support is engaged. So right now, the jack is lifted up, the trailer is fully on the truck. Let's actually take this a step further and get a measurement to see how it compares. So going to the same spot in the wheel well here, from the ground to the top inside edge, we're gonna be sitting at 38.5 inches. So it's about 1.5 inches of drop. That's not too bad, but it is also a fairly light camper. As we're driving around down the road, hitting speed bumps, maybe turning and making evasive maneuvers in the case of an emergency, we're gonna feel a lot more difference because that weight isn't as supported. So let's go ahead, install our SumoSprings, and see if that measurement changes later. And with the SumoSprings installed, I can lower the trailer down, back onto the truck, and we can see how the measurement from earlier changed. So I'll make sure that this is fully on the ball. And we can go back to the wheel well and measure the same place we did earlier. Now I will say, from my perspective back there, it didn't look like things dropped down as much. And coming back here to check on it, I can confirm that. Right now, that measurement from the ground to the top inside edge of the wheel well is 39 inches. So it is still 1 inch of drop compared to what we were with no load on the ball whatsoever. But that's gonna be pretty impressive, and that will translate to heavier loads even more, and it's going to translate in the drive quality. So now that we've seen how the springs performed, let's talk about the benefits of something like this. Now obviously this is going to provide a lot more support compared to the factory bump stops that we removed. And what that translates to really is a better ride quality when we're towing. So it's going to provide a lot more support whenever we put some tongue weight onto our vehicle or even a load in the back of the bed. These are going to make contact with the axle much sooner than the factory bump stop would. And the bump stop is really meant for just making sure that the frame and the axle don't collide. It's just there to provide a little bit of a stop, whereas this provides actual cushion at a progressive rate. So the more it's compressed, the more it's going to push back against that force and try to return the vehicle to its natural state. So if you have a heavier load in the truck bed or on the back with a camper or something, then these are going to be working harder to push back and spring back to where they want to be. And because the two springs work independently from each other, you're also going to get a lot of side-to-side support. So if you have an uneven load in the bed, or maybe we're just going down the road and experiencing body roll where it feels like the car is getting pushed, maybe a camper is getting pushed by the wind going down the highway, if it leans to the side, it'll make contact with that first spring and push it back. So again, you've got that unique side-to-side support independent from each other. And when it comes to options for support for your suspension, you've got a ton of them for the F-150. Something like this or Timbrins is gonna be your maintenance-free option. I do think these are the softer option, a little bit more cushiony, whereas the Timbrins can be a bit more firm. But both of them are going to be the maintenance-free option, and they're fixed. They provide a set amount of support. In the case of this one, it's got a 1,000-pound support capacity. Now, that doesn't change the support weight or the weight capacity of your vehicle. That's just what these can handle. And something to consider is if you're carrying the same load all the time. Let's say you've got a camper that you need some extra support with, because when you hook up to your F-150, it brings the back end down. That's going to reduce the contact of your tires at the front end. It's going to misalign your headlights, aim them higher up, and just decrease the ride quality. So we get something like this to match our camper. And because it's the same load every time, we don't mind that these are fixed. It's going to work the same every time. But if you're going to be carrying a wide variety of different trailers, let's say you've got a utility trailer where the load is constantly varying, or you're hooking up to multiple different trailers all the time, something adjustable is going to be a good option. In those cases, I would recommend airbags. Airbags are a great solution to have an adjustable option. The installation process is a little more involved, but you can make on-the-fly adjustments so long as you have some sort of air compressor on hand. And they become a much easier option if you get an onboard compressor, because that compressor is just there when you need it all the time. If you decide that the SumoSprings are the right option for you though, you do have options within that category. They make these in different densities. So the blue one is going to be your lightest density, whereas the black one is a slightly higher density, which means it provides a little bit more support. Now, depending on the trailer and the load that you're expecting, you might go for the less aggressive option or the more aggressive option. That's just down to you, but the installation process is going to be the exact same. The height of these and the bracketry is all the exact same as well, and they install the same way with the factory holes of your old bump stops. Speaking of that installation process though, let's walk you through that right now. Now, to start off the installation, you want to jack your truck up, giving the axle room to hang freely. Now, when you do this, you want to take the proper safety precautions. We've got our jack stand underneath the frame, we've got the front wheels chalked, and we've got the emergency brake on. And for the point to lift it up, we chose to jack it up by the hitch. That way the axle, again, can hang freely. You can remove the tire if you want, giving you a little bit more room to work. If you do that, just make sure that you reinstall it and torque everything down properly to make sure that it's all attached safely. But honestly, once we got it jacked up, I figured that we can show you the whole process just as easily because there's enough room to work back here. But we want to turn our attention to the factory bump stop, which we will be removing using a 13mm socket. You will need an extension for that just because it is kind of up in there and a regular long socket wasn't quite enough to reach. But just grab your ratchet and 13mm socket and head inside. We'll take our socket up into that bump stop there, get it to line up with the hardware that's in place, and start to get it loosened up. Now, depending on the age and the condition of your truck, this might be easier for some than others. Ours is a little bit firm in there, but just do your best to get that hardware out and remove that bump stop. And once that bolt is fully removed, we can just take this down from the frame rail and set it to the side. The SumoSpring comes with new brackets. Each of them are going to be in two pieces. So the first piece is what attaches to the frame rail in place of that factory bump stop. And this is what it's going to look like. We're going to have these two tabs that kind of curve on the outside and point up, two holes on the top, and then these three sets of holes on this side. We'll get to those later. Right now, what we want to turn our attention to is these tabs with the curved fronts and the top two holes. This, like I said, is going to be the piece that actually attaches to the frame rail with these tabs facing towards the inside of the truck, pointing up. So this orientation for the driver's side. And we're going to be mounting these up in those pre-existing holes that we just removed the factory bump stop from, but we're going to use the frontmost hole on the new bracket, utilizing our new bolt that came in our kit to attach it and tightening it down with a 15mm socket. Your kit does come with blue Loctite. Add a drop to here before you do that. We're not leaving these installed, so we're going to skip that step today. We've got our bracket with our bolt started in the proper hole. So I'm just going to take that, put it up into place, and use the socket to actually help me reach that bolt head and start tightening it down into that hole that we removed the factory bump stop from. Once it catches, it'll be a lot easier to just kind of let it go, start tightening it down, make sure that these tabs stay where they're supposed to stay. That's going to help us keep proper orientation front to back. And once you start to feel some resistance by hand, you can take your tool and finish the job. And once we've got that tightened down, we can repeat that process on the other side. Essentially, this will all be mirrored on the passenger side. Now we can get our SumoSpring assembled. We can attach our SumoSpring to our secondary bracket. So this is going to be the piece that joins up with the spring and installs using the smaller flange bolt that comes in your kit. That'll just install through the top into the threaded hole of the SumoSpring and tighten down with a 13mm socket. Now again, your kit does come with blue Loctite, and it does advise you to add a drop at this point, but we're not using ours today because it's not a permanent install. And once that is snug, we can take it to the bracket that we already have on the vehicle and mount it up. Before we get underneath the vehicle where things are harder to see, I want to walk through the process we're going to take to attach the two brackets together where you can just see things better. We're going to have two long bolts that come with our kit, and you can use a 6mm Allen key to hold the bolt head. And then you'll note that these two holes look very similar to the 3 sets of holes we saw on the other bracket earlier. You want to get these set up and line them up with each other at a certain height setting, and that's going to vary depending on your vehicle. But essentially you want between 1/2 inch to 1 inch of space between the bottom of the SumoSpring and your axle. To figure that out for your own application, you're going to want to take a measurement before you lift the vehicle up. But once you figure out where that setting is, get a washer slid onto the bolt, slide it through both brackets, and secure it on the other side with a flat washer and this lock nut. You'll use a 13mm wrench or socket to tighten that down while holding the other end with that 6mm Allen key, and repeat that for both holes. The last thing to note is that this open face of the bracket will face towards the outside of the vehicle. So for our driver's side, it's going to be facing the wheel like this, not like this. Now I've got one of those bolts loosely installed to make it a little easier for me to show you this, but essentially you'll get the holes lined up, pop that through, grab your washer and the nut, get that installed on the other side, and tighten everything down with the tools we mentioned earlier. And once you've got both sides installed, one final thing you might find yourself needing to do is actually go to the lines that are next to the driver's side SumoSpring. They do come a little bit close. You might need to just zip tie those together just to give a little bit of extra clearance from the side of that SumoSpring. Your application might be fine, but just a word of advice if you find that it's running a little bit close and maybe making a little bit of contact. But aside from that, that's it for the install. The process is really straightforward and only requires basic hand tools to get it all done. Your kit comes with everything you need otherwise, and the result is going to be a much better suspension. And that'll do it for our look at and installation of the SumoSprings on our 2020 Ford F-150. Thanks for watching.